Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. You are here with us. We are ZSuite to talk about the art of the possible, how ZEscrow can unlock new commercial opportunities. My name is Catherine Ring. I am the VP of Marketing here at ZSuite, and I'm joined by Nathan Baumeister, our CEO, and Aaron Junod, our CTO, who is definitely representing ZSuite all around today. So we're going to jump right into some art of the possible content and just talk about what we're excited about right now and what might be coming in the future. And at about 30 minutes in, we'll roll over to a demo and can answer any questions you have. I'm going to disappear and I'll be moderating the chat. So if you have questions, you can ask them in the chat and I'll raise them to the speakers today. And I think that's it. If you have, I'd love to hear where everybody is coming in from today. That's always so fun to see. So thanks for joining us and we'll get started.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Catherine. Excited to spend the next little bit with all of y'all as we talk about some opportunities in the commercial space, specifically about deposits. And what was interesting is I just a couple weeks ago, I went out to the desert there in Phoenix, Arizona, and spent a lot of time with a bunch of bankers. And there was basically two things that I heard people talk about. One was digital transformation. The other one was deposits. So it's kind of fun to be able to talk through some of the things that we have going on here that deal with both of them. I couldn't think of a better person to just kind of chat about what is the art of the possible with commercial customers in this particular area than our CTO, Aaron Junod. Made sure to represent the technology team well by wearing a hoodie.
I mean, this is on brand, right? This is all I ever wear. So
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So as we look at kind of the broader market on deposits or just even clients themselves, and we look at what's been going on in the digital space, I think one of the interesting things is a lot of the digital transformation first came on the consumer side. And Junod, you actually spent a good amount of time on some of that digital transformation on the consumer side in your previous lives with GZO and some PFM and then from there Jack Henry, and actually worked on some HSA things. As you look at this transformation of now digital transformation moving more from just the consumer side to commercial sides, what do you think are some of the big drivers of that kind of created this opportunity? And why do you think it was on the consumer side first versus here on the commercial side?
I'll start with the consumer versus corporate. I think volume-wise, banks, as they're deciding where to spend their digital funding, they have to respond to the biggest audience, which is the consumer side. When you look at the market out there, there's far more consumers than corporations. So that's part of why we saw mobile start to take off as well, right? Because consumers wanted more access to their data, and everybody started getting mobile phones, and having that access, it really drew a lot of attention from the banks because that's what people were asking for. As we've gone further down the line, it is funny to have the shift because with consumers, it was a lot about how to change their behaviors with cash, give them more insights, really help them with their spending. Where with businesses, it's a whole different ballgame. It's helping them be more efficient and helping them find opportunities and solve different problems. So from my perspective, it's a whole new bag of tricks to learn and to help solve, and that's super exciting and fun. And it's a bit of untapped territory that there's been a lot of mind space on how to enhance the digital experience for the consumer side. So it's pretty exciting to be on the edge of seeing the shift into commercial banking.
Yeah, and the other thing that I would add to that is we look at the transformation of consumers first, and now we're starting to see some of it going on the commercial side. One of the reasons it's just so freaking complex on the commercial side. As you look at consumers, like an individual wants to spend some money and buy something. They make that decision and they process that transaction. However, you might go to that easy, simple to use case on the commercial side, And that transaction might actually have various components of a workflow and approval that it needs to go through before it could actually even be run. And then if you look at that with a manufacturing plant, a law firm, accounting consulting agency, a SaaS company, and you look at all the spaces, you know, the difference between you and me as two different consumers versus two different businesses, the requirements are going to be a lot different. And when you try to take those differences and boil it down into a software process to be able to make it more efficient, I think it's safe to say that even a decade ago, that might have been too much for what existed in the software space.
It's a lot. It's definitely a lot. I mean, you're going from one or two accounts to an entire chart of accounts. You're going from simple purchase workflows to like you mentioned, approval workflows, different departmental groups, different ownership of funds where we kind of find some of our areas of opportunity. Like it's definitely it's a different world in business.
Yeah. Which creates a lot of opportunities. And I think that's kind of the fun piece of having such a big focus of digital transformation on the consumer side for so long. I think there's a lot of financial institutions in the US that are well behind the 8 ball in regards to offering ways to systematically run their business in a more efficient fashion, not just for the bank, but also for the end commercial customers. As we look at kind of what we do, I think we talk a lot about, there's a bunch of folks looking at moving a dollar, and we like to focus on kind of storing a dollar. So you want to expound on that a little bit and kind of why we use that construction as a differentiation on some of the things that we do within the ZEscrow platform?
Absolutely. So as consumer bank has come up, like we mentioned, a lot of those use cases are pretty simple purchase workflows. And that leads very much to the payment space really starting to take off. So we've seen on the growth in banking technology follow the industry as people really look to move money and establish all kinds of new ways to do commerce on the consumer side. We've seen things like, well, all kinds of fintechs pop up to verify accounts, to move money faster. It's just kind of followed the market. Our differentiator in storing a dollar is super interesting because we are bucking the trend a little bit. We found an opportunity to help better service some customers in a way that was congruent with say storing a dollar, and then we started to capitalize on that and really see that it's something that not enough attention has been put on. Like the market has looked at moving money, but we've got a lot of interesting use cases, a lot of ways to help businesses in storing the dollar and managing the funds once they're in there. And the byproduct of that is by helping people better manage this cash and storage over long periods of time, banks benefit by taking on some deposits and being able to better service those customers. So it's been really interesting to see how we can start to help better service some of that cash and how both the banks get the benefit and the end users. Like once you can start to change a workflow for a business, it's pretty exciting. Like when I'm talking to some of the executives and some of the other companies that we've worked with, some of the fintechs especially, and they're like, hey, I can change my business process. Like that's exciting. We're bringing something new to the market that lets them do business with their bank in a new way.
Yeah, it's for the longest time when you think of commercial deposit acquisition at a large scale, I think that the biggest thing that banks have looked at is, hey, I can offer a better rate. That's changed a little bit. You know, the cash management offerings have become more robust, and there is some differentiation across institutions on, you know, are you offering a full suite? Are you not offering a full suite? But in the end, a lot of it still is driven by rate and pricing. And the first time that when we were doing user interviews as we were developing ZEscrow, and we sat down with a particular real estate broker in Georgia, I think there was a light bulb moment that this might offer an opportunity that instead of just competing on rate, we could actually help banks compete on, like what you just said, driving more efficiencies. You just want to share a little bit more details of that story?
This was one of my favorite conversations. So as you mentioned, during the design of ZEscrow, we had great access to the banks and their customers to really interview what they're doing and help them understand, or help us understand what we could build to actually make a difference. And it was pretty late in the design series, and we had a good understanding of how the system was going to work at that point. We sat down with a couple brokers and explained to them what we were building, and they explained a bit of their work, their process. And both of these brokers spent a lot of time just going between online banking and Excel and sending things back and forth. And we talked to them about what we were building. We said, well, if your bank offered this, would you be a customer for life? And instantly they were like, yeah, absolutely. And I really knew we were onto something then, because one, that's the kind of visceral response. Like, if this does this, would you be a customer for life? Yes, absolutely. That's loyalty. That's really adding value. But on top of that, like this goes right to my why I'm here. Like, hearing that broker would not only be a customer for life, that brings the value to the bank, but they're getting more time. And they can either spend time growing their business or spend that with their family. And by virtue of us bringing these products to the bank and them offering them, we're adding value across the whole chain. And that's super valuable and meaningful to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can share so many more stories of that. And I know that our banks that are currently offering ZEscrow can share many of those examples away on multiple different verticals. I think it would be helpful as we explore, specific things of the art of the possible and some of the things that we've learned that, as we built this platform, we thought it was for this. And then we started talking to people and it was like, oh man, there's a lot more out here. I think there's two really, really broad use cases where something like ZEscrow is a necessary component in the toolbox to be able to get certain types of deposit. One is, and we refer to these oftentimes as unbound digital accounts or three-party accounts. Do you want to talk about a little bit what we mean by three-party accounts, just to kind of set the stage of like the big general use case, and then I'll take the second one.
Absolutely. So as we were going through the design of ZEscrow, one of the big things that we identified that the three-party account has some nuance to it, right? I as a business am holding cash on behalf of someone else. So the bank's relationship is with me as the business, but there's different rules of engagement that I have based on my customer that the bank needs to see. And we saw that being able to help the bank manage that relationship better, it helps everybody along the way. So there's different rules. We can do funding different. We have to handle compliance different. We can split things differently. Like we can enable a whole new set of rules for the organizations and the businesses to work together to manage that extra leaf of funds, all while giving the bank complete visibility into what's happening, which is another key component that's kind of missing from the market, giving that corporation the ability to do business the way they want, with the bank having full access and visibility into how they're doing it.
Yeah. So when we talk about three-party accounts, as Aaron just mentioned, it's this idea of an entity holding someone else's money for a period of time, right? And so there's the bank, there's the commercial customer themselves, and then it's the person they're holding the money for. And there actually are some use cases where it's, the bank, the commercial customer, and then there's actually multiple parties associated with a particular escrow account. You can think of large scale purchases where money needs to be held in escrow until the delivery of that particular purchase or whatever it might be. But this idea of the three-party accounts, which makes it really, really exciting as an opportunity, is first, that doesn't work within the schema of a typical banking technology infrastructure, right? The general assumption is that the person that has the money owns that money. And then from there, what else can we do? The other piece that's interesting, though, is that when you start talking about legislation and regulation, because most legislators see their role as kind of protecting the weaker from the stronger, is kind of the general idea. And so when a corporation is holding an individual's money, this is oftentimes a place where legislators step in to put certain rules. But what's interesting is there's no rhyme or reason on who creates the rules or at what level of government or at what level of regulation. because for, law firms, it might be state by state. Property management, we have some that are state by state, some that are county by county. Then you have like 1031 exchanges, that is a federal thing, right? So the rules are kind of circumscribed throughout. Then you have these other three-party accounts. They're like, we don't want to get regulated, so we're going to do a very good job of being very careful on how we manage these things. But what all of that does is it provides an opportunity to step in and say, hey, it looks like you have some issues of things that you need to do. Like the Atlanta group that we talked to that were brokers, the Georgia real estate group has a specific thing that if a broker is going to be holding someone else's dollars, they have to have a specific report filed with the association on a periodic basis. And that's what we talked to them about. It's like, it's such a pain to be able to do this. Oh, well, you just click a button and here's the report. And you're like, what? You can do that? Right. And so that ability to do that is awesome. The other piece of it, though, is that when you have a corporation that is holding someone else's money, this isn't always the case, but it is the case in a lot of escrow and trust accounting. The corporation is the one that's making the decision of who they're going to use to hold those dollars, which bank they're going to bank at. But in many cases, they're not getting any, or they're only getting a portion of the interest benefit, right? Because most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time when dollars are held in escrow, if there's interest being earned, it's going to go to the beneficiary. And so the price sensitivity on many of these deposits is much lower. And we've seen that drive a lot of interesting things from a calculation perspective that we've had to build on both the interest calcs as well as kind of helping to automate some of those regulations and reportings and those types of things. But I know that's a thing that your team has been spending quite a bit of time on.
Well, yeah, I mean, from the beginning, you kept the North Star of we need to make a general purpose system that really allows us to see the regulations in a various area, or the rules. Doesn't need to be regulations. As you mentioned, it can just be rules, and make sure that we can support those situations. So as we go between the different states, we can muck with our account configurations and support what we need for that. Maybe there's a fintech that needs a specific thing to be able to operate, and we can set that account up. It's great. Like we were able to identify a specific vertical and identify what rules we needed, and go from the identification of a business line to having accounts ready to fund in just a couple months. We didn't really have anything to build, and now we have a new vertical. We've got to add a new vertical into our list of verticals, because that's how they get there, right? We talk through with the bank. Oh, I've got this pile of manual work I'm doing over here for these accounts, and we're going through the implementation, and the bank will say, oh, wait a second, I can put those accounts in this platform and manage them better. And those have been some of the exciting conversations. Like we might not even know what business lines we're going to get into as we start with an implementation in the bank. And we're able to identify them, add them in, and start to add opportunities for improvement of execution on that side. It's been pretty great to be able to build the system and respond to the different regulations and basically mold it to fit what we need.
Yeah, without another year of development, right? And that was the piece, is how can we use configurations to be able to take our system and do it. So we talked a little bit about third-party accounts as one of the big umbrella use cases. I think the other one that I think is worth touching on a little bit is if anywhere in the bank you have a big lump of money that otherwise needs to be subdivided in specific ways. Right. So there's a couple, this one is a little bit more amorphous, I think, for people to understand. And honestly, when we were first building the platform, this wasn't something that we were thinking about. But when you think of, well, I'll tell you one of the biggest ones that we run into all the time. For BaaS providers, so banks that are doing banking as a service, oftentimes they have omnibus accounts that they use. And though the SaaS company may or may not have good details of who those funds belong to or whatnot, the bank definitely doesn't. And so understanding kind of the spaghetti that exists within an omnibus account when dealing with a BaaS type platform oftentimes creates a whole bunch of reconciliation, as well as, honestly, quite recently, a lot more scrutiny from a bunch of different regulators on where the bank does have to have a greater view of the ownership of all those dollars that's in these big accounts. But that's kind of one of the big use cases. But if we just like narrowed it down a little bit, one of our banks came and talked to us about a construction GL. Do you remember that one, Junod?
I somewhat, they come across my desk so often. The construction deal is one where we needed to hold some funds for the construction, pre-construction.
Yeah, exactly.
Remind me what's going on with this one.
Yeah, so we actually had two different ones. Basically, one of our banks came in. They said they have an internal GL that's a bit of a mess. That they really don't have a good reconciliation of the funds that are sitting in this GL and the ownership of those funds. Ownership isn't the right way to say it. It's where they're being directed to. So when they were closing a construction loan and it was funded, but then the funding, that money didn't actually go out until certain stages were hit. And when it was funded, it went into this overall GL, and then the ownership and the discreteness of, this, the money here for this GL goes to this and this goes to that. And they had this like aha moment. They're like, these are just sub accounts. Why don't we just use the ZEscrow platform to manage these sub accounts in our internal GL? And so they called us up, and we talked to them. We were like, yes, that is what you should do. Right. So I think these are the two really big, broad use cases, like the 3-party accounts. And then when you might have a GL or an omnibus account or some grouping of funds or money that's there that needs to have a little bit more visibility, transparency, and reconciliation across the board from that perspective. So as we go into more of the art of the possible, I think that it's worth saying when we take those two big, broad use cases, it is not hyperbole to say that there are trillions of dollars in the US economy that are being managed in these two different ways. And so the amount of deposits is staggering. The interesting thing is they're kind of hidden. Because there really hasn't been good software, good processes, good tools in place to be able to help manage these things. And so as far as the opportunity goes, there's a huge opportunity. And as we were doing our original market research, and Aaron, you kind of talked about this before, I mean, one of the interesting things is we talked to, smaller community banks, regional banks, all the way up to, we had several banks in the top 50 banks that we talked to. And time and time again, what did we find out and how they were managing these types of things?
Manually.
Yeah.
Manually, with a lot of armies of people managing the interest splits and the statements. I mean, one of the banks we talked to, they physically carried statements to their customers. They didn't have a better way to distribute them. Like, they were printing them and physically carrying them. So to be able to offer digital for that, it's great. Like, to your point, trillions of dollars sitting in ways that could not only be better serviced, but could be better regulated and understood. There's so much opportunity in these funds, and they're everywhere. Like, think of every company that's holding funds. There's warranty companies. There's just, it's everywhere. The deeper we've gone, we see more and more use cases and more places where, in many ways, corporations are forced to build things in their own infrastructure to manage these funds, and we can provide an API for the bank so that the corporation can do it in a more sane, easier way. And at the same time, the bank gets visibility into what's happening. So lot of opportunity to help both the banks manage the funds better, but let's help those corporations do it a little easier too.
Yeah, absolutely. It even got to one point that a top 5 bank that had been servicing these types of accounts recently just stopped. They said, we're not going to do it anymore. because it's too manual. And so you're even talking about I mean, these guys have, I don't even know what their technology budget is in regards to building these types of things, but they still were doing it manually. And so, just creates a great opportunity, because when we talk about the art of the possible, one, there has to be an opportunity. And there's definitely an opportunity in regards to the deposits that are out there, and the commercial customers that are out there and all that fun stuff. But you also have to be able to support it. So, there was one bank we were talking to that they said, we love escrow deposits because they're low cost and we need to grow deposits. They're not one of our clients, so they weren't working with us. They said, let's go get some. They got 15 clients on board. Woohoo! Super excited. That represented about $200 million in deposits. Huge win. Then all of a sudden they looked around, they said, oh crap, we have 3 full-time employees doing nothing but answering the phone with these guys. Hey, what's my sub-account balance here? Hey, can you move this here? Can you move that here? Can you close this account? And those 3 people were literally just the interface. Then they were then creating tickets that had to be sent to the back office for someone in the back office to be able to do these things. And so they stopped offering it. So anything else you have to add on that? And the art of the possible being these 2 things. The opportunity exists, but then you can actually support it in a profitable fashion.
Well, and those 3 employees, they understand the business really well, and they're stuck doing administrative tasks. Imagine if you could enable them to actually go find deposits and stop worrying about the splitting of interest and the statements and opening and closing of accounts and talking to customers. What if they were out there actually getting more and servicing them better? And like, the real opportunity is, what more can the banks do once they have digital tools that can help them move faster?
Yeah, it's always the question has been around, as technology continues to get better and better, like, hey, if some aspects of my job are automated, then that means that my job is no longer necessary. And I'll say the arc of human innovation has always been that you just find better use of time that can drive higher value. And we've seen that with digital transformation all throughout.
Yeah, we have definitely seen a material impact in a number of our banks where they are spending less time managing these accounts, but they're not letting the people go. Instead, they're hiring new people to build new business lines. We've seen the exact opposite. We've seen property teams grow inside banks and focus more on growing the property, and then just hiring new verticals. Like, let's go get this vertical and that vertical, and bring in specialists that can help grow that. So it's exciting.
Yeah, drive to growing the business rather than running the business, because the software can run a lot of the business. So there are some people that when they first think escrow, the first thing they think about is mortgage escrow, right? Which is not what we're talking about. Setting aside a portion of the monthly payment that comes in for a mortgage to go to property taxes or insurance or whatnot. We're really focused on these commercial use cases. That's why we're talking about art of possible with your commercial customers. So for those of you that are more familiar with commercial escrow, I think most people will think of law firms. Most people will think of municipalities, because they have various different use cases that fit with within both escrow accounts and trust accounts and sub-accounting. A lot of people, depending on the state, think of property management because of like security deposits and those types of things. 1031 exchanges have come up quite a bit. These are kind of more of your route type of use cases that people that do understand the escrow space typically think of. But one of the fun things that you and I have been able to do is we've been talking to banks throughout the nation, as well as having companies inbound reach out to us because we do escrow, is some of these crazy off the wall use cases that we got that we would have never expected, but then found out, yeah, we can definitely support that. So do you want to share a couple of your favorites that have come across your desk that you've seen?
I mean, being a technology builder, clearly fintechs is one of the ones that I'm most interested in. Many fintechs are managing funds on behalf of their customer base, so being able to work with them and better manage those funds. We had one go out to market. They were banking with a bank and were looking for a new sponsor bank, and they put out a request for a proposal. Reading it was like reading a requirements list for our platform. So we went to the negotiating table with one of our sponsor banks and ended up landing them. And these are some of the conversations that are super fun when you can talk to the executives and they're like, I can change my business process with your API. And so really being able to bring new tools to help fintechs grow is near and dear to my heart. But on top of that, like just we've identified nursing homes and retirement homes. There's self mortgages. There's just so many. There's aviation is a use case that we've started to identify. Any place where like it's surprising as we talk with more and more companies, you wouldn't think, oh, of course you're holding funds over there. Like, of course, it comes a second thought once you think about it, but you just kind of ignore it when you're scanning the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the ones that came to mind too that you shared a little bit. There's this one company, they manage hundreds of millions of dollars of escrow deposits, but basically what they do is there's some sort of payment that is given to a consumer. However, it can only be used for certain types of expenses. So instead of actually giving the funds to the consumer, they give it to a third party that hold it there. When the RFP came, I'm sure it didn't say this verbatim, but this is how I read it. We never want to log into a system ever to manage any of these escrow accounts. And the fact that the bank that we were working with was now able to offer that because we could hook up directly to this company's software via APIs to manage all these escrow accounts. You're like, that's awesome. And then we get a startup company that reaches out that's in the storage unit rental area, and they're like, okay, I have these things that I need to set aside in escrow, and I don't know what to do with them. And now as they're kicking off their business, they're literally building into their processes as a startup company that our escrow software is offered through one of our banks, right? Because all of the things that we do is always through our banks, right? We don't contract directly with anybody. It's all through the bank. But anyways, it's just always so much fun to be able to do all those things. So any last words before we jump over to the demo?
Well, yeah, just real quick on that one. That's a real special opportunity for our banks too, because as you mentioned, that fintech isn't an expert in escrow, and they don't want to be. They want to focus on how they add value to the market. So our banks can come in and help some of these fintechs solve these problems without thinking about it, and that gives their fintechs competitive advantage. So
absolutely,
yeah,
awesome. Well, that was a lot of fun talking about the art of the possible. Like I said, tons of deposits out there across so many different verticals, many of which you might not even think about, but a way to actually have a value differentiation. So it was great talking about it. I'm sure there's several of you that's like, hey, it was great to hear that, but can I see it? So I'll transition over to a demo so we can actually look at the platform and you can kind of see how it goes. Please feel free to drop any questions in the chat as I go through the demo to be able to discuss it there. So let me share my screen. All right. And just to verify, I want to make sure that my screen is there. Junod, can you see it coming across?
I sure can.
Excellent. So this is the ZEscrow platform. It is a platform that we white label for banks. This is our demo bank, Focus Federal Bank. So you can see that it's kind of built out for them. This is a web-based application that's available on any browser. And we did build it to be both responsive and adaptive. So no matter which device that they're going to use, they'll have a good user experience while doing so. I always do like to share that there's 3 levels of access here. You know, we talked about kind of that 3-party system or those 3-party accounts. And so we have that built within the platform. So we're looking at Focus Federal Bank. The team at the bank can have access to this. Each of these tiles represents what would be the 2nd level of access, which would be the commercial customers themselves that are managing these escrow deposits. Some of you might have some use cases where the bank itself actually acts as the escrow agent or as the trustee. In that case, for those use cases, then the bank too would have, you know, their own specific tile as well, where you could go in and manage those trust accounts or escrow accounts. The third level of access is an optional one, and it's limited based off of what both the bank as well as the commercial customer wants to do. But in the case where there is an escrow account or a trust account or an FBO account, that beneficiary might have some access to the platform. A really good example could be as simple as their ability to fill out a W-9 form. If it is an interest-bearing account and a portion of the interest goes to that beneficiary, through the platform, can have them fill that out electronically rather than chasing emails or faxes or whatever might be, or paper copies in some cases from there. So those are the three levels of access. When we look at the management of these escrow accounts, as Aaron and I both described, one of the biggest pain points was how manually intensive the processing of these accounts were. And so it was important to us to be able to build a platform that allowed the commercial customers to have a self-service platform. So I'm actually going to go ahead and jump into that specific regard. And I'm picking a law firm here. I could have really picked any use case. But this is John Smith & Sons Law Group. So this is a law firm that is using the ZEscrow platform through Focus Federal Bank to manage their various types of escrow accounts, sub-accounts, FBO accounts, trust accounts. They have the ability to log in and view these accounts to be able to do a lot of different things. So first, they have $700,000 of total balances across these accounts. And all of their sub accounts are here where you can actually manage them on a day-to-day basis. You'll see that we have multiple folders set up. These folders are set up to be able to help the management of these escrow accounts in a very straightforward fashion. It's very easy for the commercial customers to open up new folders and manage them as you see fit. And then you can also have subfolders beneath there. So in this particular case, John Smith & Sons Law Group is managing, they act as an accommodator for 1031 exchanges. So they have their 1031 exchange sub-accounts under that particular folder. But then they might have other different types of escrow accounts. For example, custodial trust accounts, right, would be sitting there. And maybe they also use this for retainers, right? So in this case, it's not money that it's not money that they actually hold on behalf of someone else. It's money that they've earned themselves. But they're using this to kind of keep that subledger of the use of those funds from those particular clients, right? So all of these are very different use cases, and they want to have different folders from there. Here, they can also pull statements, they can pull reports and download the data into CSV files that they could then use to do additional analysis on the data, or they could use it to import into external services that they have. And then besides just viewing the information, looking at the information, and organizing the information, there's multiple things they can do, from opening up new sub-accounts, inclusive of getting those W-9 or W-8 forms all through this process. They're able to go into any particular sub-account itself and take actions such as transferring funds in and out, closing out sub-accounts, being able to upload documents that need to be associated with the sub-account. So in this example, it's a 1031 exchange. Maybe they want the exchange agreement to actually be associated with the sub-account, so they could upload it right there. If any information changes from a beneficiary perspective, they're able to do that. It's important to note that in the traditional way of managing escrow accounts, all of these would be manual processes of emails or phone calls that multiple people would have to touch. And instead, the folks at John Smith & Sons Law Group can log in and do all of this themselves. It is worth noting that the bank still can do this on behalf of John Smith & Sons Law Group. So if for whatever reason you still need to do a white glove service in that particular case, or there is something that needs to be done in a quick fashion and they're not able to log in, your team at the bank is able to log in and service the accounts as well. However, the large majority do use it as a self-serve fashion. The last thing that I would mention in regards to this self-serve aspect, and one of the things that both Aaron and I discussed today, was the idea that to interact with the system, it doesn't have to be just through our user interface. Since we did build this as an API-first system, the input of what to do, whether it's opening up a new account, moving funds, closing an account, etc. We can get that from other sources outside of just the user interface. One example, and I'll go ahead and drop over to a property management example. In certain states, property managers need to have separate accounts opened up for every single security deposit account. Maybe it's to calculate interest that needs to go to the tenant. Maybe it's because they have certain requirements that they actually need to send the account number to that tenant. But let's say that Second Rosedale Realty Corp, you can see they have each of their buildings that they own set up, and then underneath there they have all of their security deposits. Under their, let's say they buy a new building, and the building has 200 doors or 400 doors or something like that. You better believe they don't want to come and click this new sub account button 200 times. And so we can work with those commercial customers through the bank, of course, to be able to get that information in a file format where we can do a bulk upload or bulk action. Whether it's 200 or tens of thousands, it really doesn't matter from our system's perspective, because either way, it's going to be able to save a lot of time and manual input from them. And then that third way that they could have self-serve outside of the user interface or those bulk actions, as we discussed, the direct API connection. When you have a client that does have a software system that is API enabled, we can take the bank's instance of ZEscrow and hook that up to that software system to be able to get all of the indicators that we need to be able to manage those escrow accounts. And it's termed in a headless fashion, meaning not through a user interface. And then the last thing that I would show from a demo perspective is the way that we manage the different types of escrow accounts or sub accounts based off of the different use cases. As Aaron and I sat here and discussed the art of the possible, we discussed so many different use cases across multiple different industries where there might be variations based off of geography or regulations on whether it's the city, county, state, or federal level. The way that we manage that is we build templates. So we have these templates here that we're able to build. And then when we built a template, we can then apply that template to a whole swath of clients. For example, all 1031 exchange accommodators that you have within the platform could be an example. However, we could also just have a template apply to a specific client, right? There might be something specific about a client that they want to do that's different than others. So we can apply a template there. We can even go as far as applying a template down to the sub account level. So if you remember when we looked at the law firm, John Smith & Sons Law Group, you had 1031 exchanges, you had custodial trust accounts, you had retainers. The sub accounts in those different folders would be using different templates because of the fact that each of them are different types of accounts. So we can build these templates. For example, we can have the interest, whether it's interest bearing or not. If it is interest bearing, how do we calculate the interest? What's the rate? Are there tiers? Who the tax owner is going to be? If it's, if there's any portion of the interest that's split, how do we actually calculate that split? And then we would apply those to all the calculations there. Other aspects of things we could build into templates are different types of notifications, like account opening notifications, statements to the beneficiary, interest disbursement. And then there's some workflows that we could put in as well, again, to help manage the complexity that exists around these types of accounts. So it makes it so that it's a really robust platform that can handle lots of different types of use cases as you figure out what the art of the possible is. Now, one of the things that is very near and dear to our hearts is the fact that we believe that a lot of software companies have it wrong on how they think about software. They look at software and they say, software is the solution. And we overtly recognize that software is only part of the solution. So that's why we actually have an extension of our team that does nothing but work with your team across the entire customer journey. So whether it's a new prospect that is thinking about using the platform, we'll be on with your sales team doing a demo. It's a current client that is thinking about transitioning. We'll be there to help. You have a property manager that bought a new building and they need to do a bulk upload. We're right there to be able to work with you. you have a new software client that has the some needs with these third-party accounts or for these reconciliations or virtual accounts or whatever it is that it might be. They want to do an API integration. We're right there to work through all those things right with you. So we just like to assume that we're just part of your team, and we'll work right with you to make sure that you can fully utilize the platform and to be able to get everything that you need to be successful. So with that, just want to open it up, see if there are any questions from the audience on anything that we've discussed or the demo itself. Please feel free to go ahead and go on the chat. If not, it's definitely been a pleasure spending some time with everyone today and discussing what is the art of the possible with the ZEscrow platform and your abilities to help grow your commercial deposits.
Great. Thanks so much, Nathan and Aaron. You will receive the recording of this webinar as a follow-up. And we will be having more webinars soon. So we look forward to seeing you again. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.